You're scrolling. Everyone's doing the dance. Everyone's using the same sound. Everyone's posting the same aesthetic, the same filter, the same caption structure. And you pause. Not because you don't understand it, not because you're confused, but because something inside you, something quiet, something old, just won't let you join. You watch. You observe. You even appreciate the creativity sometimes. But when your hand hovers over the create button, something pulls it back. A whisper that says, this isn't you. This feels like pretending. This feels like losing something. And here's what nobody tells you about that whisper. It's not just preference. It's not just taste. It's not you being difficult, or contrarian, or too cool for fun. It's architecture. It's the way your nervous system learned years ago that visibility without authenticity is dangerous. That joining something just because everyone else is doing it means abandoning the one thing you've spent your entire life trying to protect. Your sense of self. Because here's the paradox at the center of your experience. The very thing that keeps you from joining trends, your fierce commitment to internal authenticity, is the same thing that sometimes leaves you feeling profoundly, achingly alone. You chose self-integrity over social belonging so early and so completely that now, even when you want to feel part of something, even when you want to join the noise and the joy and the collective momentum, you can't. Not without feeling like you're betraying yourself. You became so good at standing apart that you forgot how to stand together. And the cost of that protection? It's invisible. It's the kind of loneliness that doesn't announce itself. The kind that lives in the space between you and everyone else, close enough to see the warmth, far enough to never feel it. This isn't about trends. It never was. This is about what happens when a child learns that conformity equals erasure. When adaptation feels like annihilation. When the only way to survive was to become someone nobody could shape, mold, or rewrite. And now, as an adult, you're living with the consequences of that choice. A choice you didn't even know you were making. Let's name what we're actually talking about. This isn't introversion. It's not social anxiety. It's not even being different. This is what psychologists would recognize as a protective identity structure built on differentiation as survival. A deeply rooted psychological pattern where your sense of self is so tightly bound to not being like others that participation in collective behavior feels existentially threatening. Think of it like this. Imagine your identity is a house. For most people, that house has rooms, some private, some shared. They can invite people in. They can step outside and join the neighbors without feeling like the walls are collapsing. But for you, the house is the walls. And every time you consider joining something collective, something external, it feels like you're being asked to tear down a wall. To let something in that might rearrange the furniture, might repaint the rooms, might make you unrecognizable to yourself. This pattern is often rooted in what developmental psychology calls insecure avoidant attachment. As a child, you likely experienced environments where emotional attunement was inconsistent, conditional, or absent. Where expressing needs led to disappointment. Where showing vulnerability led to dismissal. So you learned to meet your own needs. You learned that the safest place to be was inside your own head, relying on your own judgment, trusting your own internal compass, even if it meant walking alone. You became what the psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott called a false self-rejecter. Someone so attuned to inauthenticity that even the possibility of performing a self that isn't entirely yours triggers deep discomfort. But here's the crucial insight. This isn't a personality trait. This is a schema, a cognitive emotional framework built in response to relational wounding. Schemas, according to Jeffrey Young's schema therapy model, are self-perpetuating patterns formed in childhood that shape how we perceive threats, how we protect ourselves, and how we navigate belonging. Your schema says, belonging requires abandoning yourself. Therefore, to preserve yourself, you must remain separate. And this plays out neurologically too. Research on the default mode network, the brain's introspective, self-referential system, shows that people with high trait differentiation and low social conformity often have heightened activity in regions associated with internal narrative construction. Your brain is literally wired to prioritize internal coherence over external validation. You're not broken. You're responding to old data with perfect logic. But the data is outdated. And the response, while once protective, is now constrictive. Because what kept you safe as a child, your refusal to dissolve into others' expectations, has become the thing that keeps you isolated as an adult. So how do you heal this? How do you soften the walls without losing the house? Not quickly. Not easily. But honestly. And with compassion. First, inner child reparenting. You need to go back to the child who learned that joining meant losing. Sit with them. Let them know, you did what you had to do. You protected us. And because of you, we survived. But then gently, we're safe now. We can let people in without disappearing. We can participate without performing. This isn't about overriding your instincts. It's about updating the threat assessment. Second, shadow work. Examine the parts of yourself you've rejected in the name of authenticity. The parts that want to be silly. That want to follow something just because it's fun. That want to feel part of the crowd sometimes. Those parts aren't fake. They're not betrayals. They're aspects of your wholeness you've been too afraid to integrate. Carl Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Your shadow isn't your conformity. It's your fear of ordinariness. Your terror that without your differentiation you're invisible. Third, nervous system regulation. Your body holds this pattern. It's in your shoulders when you see a trend go viral. It's in your chest when someone asks you to join something. Practice somatic release, breath work, gentle movement, grounding techniques. Teach your nervous system that participation doesn't equal annihilation. Let your body learn what your mind is starting to understand. You can be part of something and still be yourself. Fourth, choosing softness over survival mode. Start small. Join something low stakes. Not because you love it, not because it's you, but because you're practicing a new skill, the skill of belonging without erasure. Wear the color everyone's wearing. Try the recipe everyone's making. Use the sound everyone's using. And notice, you're still here. You're still whole. The walls didn't collapse. You just participated. And it was okay. Here's the truth that took me years to understand. Authenticity isn't about being different. It's about being honest. And sometimes the most honest thing you can say is, I want to be part of this. Even if it's not profound. Even if it's just for fun. That's not selling out. That's not losing yourself. That's integration. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage." Your dragon is your fear of ordinariness. Of being seen as unremarkable. Of dissolving into the crowd. But what if that fear is actually an invitation? An invitation to discover that you can be both, unique and connected. Special and part of something. Differentiated and belonging. What if the goal isn't to be fixed, but to become whole? You don't have to join every trend. You don't have to perform enthusiasm you don't feel. You don't have to abandon your discernment or your depth or your careful, hard-won sense of self. But maybe, just maybe, you can allow yourself one small act of participation. One moment where you choose connection over self-protection. One breath where you let yourself be ordinary and discover that ordinary doesn't mean invisible. Because you were never ordinary. Not really. You were just alone. And you mistook that loneliness for identity. But you're not alone anymore. Not if you don't want to be. The door is open. The invitation is real. And you, exactly as you are, dragons and all, are welcome. If this resonated with you, if you felt seen in these words, share this with someone who might need it. Subscribe if you want more explorations of the hidden psychology beneath our everyday patterns. And remember, the goal isn't to become someone else. It's to become more of yourself. All of it. Even the parts that want to belong. Thank you for trusting me with your time. I'll see you in the next one. Let's talk about what this costs you. The real cost. Not the surface level, "Oh, I just don't like trends" cost. The deep, existential cost. You carry what I call invisible grief. The mourning of a kind of belonging you've never allowed yourself to experience. You watch people laugh together over something silly, something trivial, something everyone is doing, and part of you aches. Not because you want to do the thing. But because you want to feel what they're feeling. The ease of shared joy. The lightness of not having to be special. The relief of being part of something without losing yourself in it. But you can't access that. Because underneath every invitation to join, every trend that sweeps through your feed, your nervous system hears a different message. If you do this, you'll disappear. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote about the concept of the crowd is untruth. The idea that losing yourself in collective identity is a form of spiritual death. And for you, that resonates. You felt it. You've lived it. You've watched people dissolve into groupthink, into performance, into curated sameness, and you swore you'd never do that. But Kierkegaard also warned of the opposite danger. The person so committed to individuality that they become disconnected from the shared human experience. Alone not by circumstance but by design. Isolated not by exclusion but by self-exile. And that's where you live. In the tension between those two deaths. The death of self through conformity. The death of connection through isolation. And the fear beneath it all, the fear you don't say out loud, is this: what if I'm not actually special? What if my refusal to join isn't integrity, it's just fear? What if I've convinced myself I'm choosing authenticity when really, I'm just afraid of being seen as ordinary? That fear is the ghost in the machine. It's the thing that makes you second-guess every choice, every preference, every moment where you choose solitude over participation. And it complicates everything. It complicates friendships because you can't fully relax into shared interests. It complicates romance because you need someone who gets your separateness without making you feel wrong for it. It complicates joy because even when something delights you, there's a part of you scanning. Is this me? Or is this something I absorbed? You've become a person who audits your own soul. And that is exhausting. So what does this actually look like in adulthood? How does this pattern show up in your daily life, your relationships, your sense of self? Let's map it. In relationships, you might find yourself drawn to people who are also outsiders, artists, deep thinkers, people on the margins. But even then, you struggle with emotional intimacy. Because intimacy requires softness. It requires letting someone influence you. And influence feels like loss of self. You might intellectualize your emotions. You'll tell someone about your feelings rather than letting them feel your feelings with you. You'll explain your inner world and articulate distanced language, because vulnerability without control feels unbearable. You become the person people admire but rarely feel close to. They respect your mind. They value your perspective. But they don't always feel like they know you. In career, you might struggle with workplace culture. The small talk, the team-building exercises, the enforced enthusiasm. It all feels performative to you, hollow, like everyone's playing a game you didn't agree to join. You excel in independent work. You thrive when given autonomy. But collaboration, true collaboration where you have to merge your vision with someone else's, feels like compromise. And compromise feels like betrayal. You become the person who's brilliant but difficult, visionary but isolated, respected but not included. In self-worth, you might tie your value to your uniqueness, to being the person who sees what others don't, who thinks differently, who refuses to follow. But underneath that there's a terror. If I'm not special, I'm nothing. So you can't rest. You can't just be ordinary for a day. You can't let yourself enjoy something popular without questioning whether it's really you. You become addicted to differentiation. And that addiction is a prison. In boundaries, paradoxically, you might have weak boundaries in unexpected areas. Because you've spent so much energy protecting your internal world that you forget to protect your time, your energy, your physical space. You'll say no to trends but yes to people-pleasing in private. You'll refuse to join the crowd but overextend yourself for individuals who seem to get you. You become selectively porous, rigid in some ways, dissolved in others. In emotional regulation, you might experience what therapists call all-or-nothing emotional states. You're either completely self-contained or completely overwhelmed. There's no middle ground. No place where you can feel your feelings without fear of losing control. You become someone who is either hyper-rational or deeply dysregulated. And the transition between those states is sudden, disorienting, terrifying. In internal identity, you might struggle with something psychologists call identity foreclosure, the sense that you've committed to a version of yourself so early and so completely that you're afraid to evolve. You become the person who says, I've always been like this. And while that continuity feels safe, it also feels suffocating. Because you're not static. No one is. But growth for you feels like betrayal. Like abandoning the child who fought so hard to stay whole. Here's the critical realization. None of these patterns are personality traits. They're coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms don't define you. They're just strategies your nervous system learned when it had limited options. The beginning of unlearning isn't about forcing yourself to join trends. It's not about making yourself more normal. It's about witnessing. It's about sitting with the fear underneath the refusal and asking, what am I actually protecting? And is it still in danger? It's about recognizing that the child who needed to stay separate to stay safe is not the adult who can now choose connection without dissolution. You are not that child anymore. But your nervous system hasn't caught up yet.